Hello, and thanks for joining us for this Africa Insight. Today we're going to be discussing the first of a series of 4 scenarios on South Africa's general elections that are to be held next month. So next month's general elections are said to be a game changer just because all expectations are that the ANC is going to lose its majority. My name is Jock Null. I'm joined by my colleague Lo Null. Today's scenario is essentially our baseline. Lo, can you please give us an overview of what we expect?
You're quite right, Jacques. All expectations are that the ANC is going to dip below 50% for the first time. It has been in power since 1994, but over the last 3 election cycles, we've seen a drop in support and an accelerating drop in support, which suggested even back in 2019 that 50% was going to be difficult to achieve in 2024. Events over the last 5 years have done very little to convince people that the ANC is good at governing the country, and one can expect that their return is not just going to be below 50, but perhaps several percentage points below 50. Recent polling seems to suggest that the support could go as low as the high 30s. We would suggest that would not be the case. It would be such a precipitous drop in support that it would be quite unprecedented. But we, in our first and in our baseline scenario, we assume that the support is within the 46 to 49% range, in which case the ANC will have to go in search of coalition partners. In this scenario, their deficit in the National Assembly, the 400-seat National Assembly, is about 15, 16 seats. And we believe that they'll be able to make up that deficit by partnering a series of smaller parties. Here we can see them potentially partnering with parties like the Inkatha Freedom Party, the Patriotic Alliance, parties like Al-Jama, Good. It needs to be said that our current cabinet already features an opposition leader in that cabinet. Patricia de Lille of the Good Party is already a member of government, and so parties like that, I think, would be willing to go into a coalition with the ANC with a promise of a ministerial appointment, maybe a senior position in parliament. And for the Inkatha Freedom Party, would probably be the largest of these partners, maybe a power-sharing agreement that favors them in their home base of KwaZulu-Natal would make that scenario attractive for the IFP.
And do you think the scenario has any significant policy implications?
On the policy front, one can't imagine these small parties, specifically the 1- and 2-seat parties, being able to exert an awful lot of pressure on the ANC as such a massive, overwhelming majority partner. So in that sense, the ANC will continue to rule unfettered, having to make concessions along the way, but non-significant concessions. Policy differences between those parties and the ANC are also not so significant. And so besides not really having an awful lot of bargaining power, these parties don't differ philosophically that much from the ANC. And so that's why we say it's very much a continuity scenario where the ANC continues to govern in a different form. But what that will have, the impact of that on the economic front, perhaps you're better placed to comment on that very essential and very, very important question.
I think the important point is that it's a scenario of continuity. So on growth, we don't see any major changes. Supply side constraints remain the biggest concern. Energy, transport, those are addressed, but it's in no different way. So it's going to take very long to address those situations. Growth remains about just under 1.5% per annum. I do think markets are also pricing in this scenario. So we might see some volatility in the rand and yields in the lead up to elections. But after the dust settles, we don't expect the rand or yields to deviate too much from their current levels, and there might actually be a slight improvement due to this uncertainty, this risk premium just dropping a bit. Just lastly, government finances, again, continuity, weak growths containing revenue. A lot of borrowing is really pushing up recurrent spending, so public debt is expected to increase to stabilize just under 90% of GDP over the medium to long term, and with credit rating downgrades remaining a risk. All right, let's wrap it up there. You can find the link to the full research briefing below. Next week, we'll be discussing what many consider the downside scenario, which is an ANC-EFF coalition. Thanks again for joining. Goodbye.